Professor Vextal adjusted his thermal regulators for the third time this morning, a nervous habit that had developed over his 47 years of teaching xenobiology at the Galactic University. Today was different though. Today, he was finally going to show those smug little students what real terror looked like. "Attention, class," Vextal announced, his voice carrying that particular tone professors use when they think they're about to blow minds. "Today we study the most feared predator in known space. The Void Crawler." The assembled students, a mix of Zenthari, Klaxons, and one solitary human named Jake Miller, looked up with varying degrees of interest. The human was slouched in his chair, casually munching on something called pizza rolls from a crinkly package. Vextal had been teaching long enough to recognize the signs. The Zenthari were already activating their defensive pheromone glands. The Klaxons had their eye stalks rotating nervously. But the human? The human was just sitting there. Eating. The Void Crawler, Vextal continued, warming to his subject, is an apex predator from the Nightmare Sector. It measures 15 feet in length, possesses razor-sharp mandibles, and can phase through solid matter at will. He paused dramatically. It has never been successfully contained by any known species. A Klaxon student named Blip raised a trembling appendage. "Professor, are you sure it's safe to have one here?" "Of course not." Vextal laughed, that particular laugh professors use when they think they're being clever. "Which is precisely why I've had it delivered in a maximum security containment field." Jake Miller looked up from his snack. "Cool. When do we see it?" The casualness in the human's voice made Vextal's confidence waver slightly. He'd studied human psychological profiles. They were supposed to be as terrified of apex predators as any sensible species. Perhaps this one hadn't fully grasped the situation yet. "Right now, actually," Vextal said, activating the holographic display. The containment field shimmered into view, and inside was nothing. Vextal blinked all four of his eyes in sequence. The containment field was definitely active. The readings showed a living creature inside. But he couldn't see anything. Professor," called out a Zenthari student named Fizz. "Where is it?" It's there," Vextal insisted, checking his instruments frantically. "The bio readings are off the charts. It must be using its phase abilities to remain partially invisible." That's when they heard it. A sound that had haunted the nightmares of 1,000 different species across the galaxy. A low, chittering whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Zenthari students immediately began releasing panic pheromones. The Klaxons curled into defensive balls. Even Vextal felt his respiratory system seize up momentarily. Jake Miller took another bite of his pizza roll. The chittering grew louder, more agitated. Suddenly, the air near the back of the classroom began to shimmer, and something large and absolutely horrifying began to materialize. Vextal had seen images, of course, but nothing could have prepared him for seeing a living void crawler. It was like someone had taken every childhood nightmare and given it far too many legs and an attitude problem. Its carapace was the color of deep space, its mandibles dripped with something that definitely wasn't saliva, and its compound eyes reflected light in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Oh my stars," whispered Fizz, just before fainting onto her desk. The void crawler, now fully visible, swiveled its horrific head around the classroom. Its gaze swept over the cowering Zenthari, the ball-shaped Klaxons, the trembling Professor Vextal, and finally came to rest on Jake Miller, who waved. "Hey there, big guy," Jake said cheerfully. "You're pretty neat looking." The void crawler froze. Its mandibles stopped clicking. Its compound eyes seemed to focus with what could only be described as confusion. Vextal watched in amazement as the most feared predator in known space tilted its head like a confused pet. The creature that had reportedly devoured entire space stations was now making a sound that was distinctly less terrifying death whisper and more uncertain questioning chirp. "Professor," Jake called out, not taking his eyes off the creature, "I think your scary bug might be lost." "Lost?" Vextal squeaked. "It's not lost. It's sizing you up for consumption." Jake shrugged and held out his package. "Want a pizza roll? They're pretty good, though I guess you might not be into processed cheese and mystery meat." The void crawler took a step backward, then another. The absolute apex predator of the galaxy, the stuff of legends and nightmares, the creature that could phase through solid matter and had never been successfully contained, was backing away from a human holding snack food. "This is impossible," Vextal muttered, checking his instruments again. "The bio readings show extreme agitation, but it's not attacking. It should be attacking." That's when Jake did something that would be talked about in xenobiology classes for decades to come. Stood up. The void crawler immediately skittered behind the nearest chair, which happened to belong to a still unconscious Fizz. The creature that had terrorized 3 sectors of the galaxy was now huddled behind a classroom chair, making sounds that were distinctly whimpering in nature. Jake looked at Vextal with genuine confusion. "Professor, I think your monster is broken." Jake Miller scratched his head and looked down at the supposedly terrifying apex predator that was now cowering behind a desk chair like a cat hiding from a vacuum cleaner. "Hey buddy, you okay back there?" Professor Vextal felt his world collapsing around him. 47 years of teaching, and this was how his career would end. Not with some glorious scientific breakthrough, but with a human treating the galaxy's most feared monster like a lost puppy. "This cannot be happening," Vextal muttered, frantically pressing buttons on his control panel. "Computer, run full diagnostic on containment field breach protocols." "Containment field operating at optimal parameters," the computer replied in that annoyingly calm voice computers always use during disasters. "Specimen appears to be experiencing acute social anxiety." "Social anxiety?" Vextal's voice cracked. "It's a void crawler. They don't get social anxiety. They get hungry." Meanwhile, Jake had crouched down near the chair where the creature was hiding. "You know what? I bet you're just scared because you're in a new place with all these strangers, right?" The void crawler peeked one compound eye around the chair leg and made a sound that was definitely not the bone-chilling shriek of an apex predator. It sounded more like a nervous hiccup. "That's what I thought," Jake said gently. "My dog Rex used to do the same thing when we had company over. Big tough guy at home, but put him around new people and he'd hide under the couch." The Zen3 students who weren't unconscious were staring in complete bewilderment. Fizz had woken up and was now questioning everything she'd ever learned about xenobiology. The klaxons were slowly unrolling from their defensive positions, though they kept their eye stalks pointed firmly at the exits. "Mr. Miller." Vextal called out desperately. "Please step away from the creature. It could phase through that chair at any moment and devour you." "Nah, I don't think so," Jake replied, still crouched down. "Look at his body language. See how his mandibles are tucked in? And his legs are all pulled up close to his body? Classic defensive posture. He's not hunting, he's hiding." The void crawler made another soft chirping sound and extended one claw toward Jake, then immediately pulled it back like a shy child reaching for candy. "There we go," Jake said encouragingly. "You want to say hi, don't you?" Vextal watched in horror as his carefully planned demonstration of galactic terror turned into what appeared to be an interspecies friendship session. "The containment field," he whispered to himself. "I could reactivate the containment field." But he didn't. Because even a 47-year-old xenobiology professor with a reputation to maintain had to admit that what he was witnessing was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen in his career, Jake slowly extended his hand toward the creature. "It's okay, big guy. I know you're probably not used to people being nice to you, right? I bet everyone just screams and runs away." The void crawler's compound eyes focused on Jake's outstretched hand. Very slowly, very carefully, it reached out with one claw and gently touched Jake's fingertip. The moment of contact sent a wave of shocked silence through the classroom that was somehow louder than any scream could have been. "Holy nebulae," breathed a klaxon student named Bloop. "It's making friends with the human." "That's impossible," Vextal insisted, but his voice had lost all conviction. "Void crawlers are solitary hunters. They don't form social bonds." "Maybe they just never had the chance," Jake suggested, now gently scratching behind what might have been the creature's equivalent of ears. The void crawler was making a sound that could only be described as purring, if purring sounded like distant thunder mixed with grinding metal. "This is going to completely rewrite xenobiology textbooks," Fizz said weakly. "This is going to get me fired," Vextal added, when the classroom door burst open and Dean Thorpax rushed in with a full security detail. The dean was an imposing Corvani who had never met a crisis he couldn't make worse with excessive bureaucracy. "Professor Vextal," the dean shouted. "We detected a containment breach. Where is the dangerous?" His voice trailed off as he took in the scene before him. Jake Miller was sitting cross-legged on the floor. The legendary void crawler, terror of the spaceways, was curled up next to him like an oversized, multi-legged house cat. Jake was feeding it pizza rolls, which the creature was accepting with delicate precision. "Oh," said Dean Thorpax. "Dean," Jake called out cheerfully, "meet my new friend. I'm thinking of calling him Bruce. He really likes processed cheese." The security team, all heavily armed and expecting to face down a monster, were now staring at what appeared to be an impromptu picnic between a human and an apex predator. "Security report," one of the guards said into his communicator, his voice slightly strained. "Threat level has been downgraded to adorable." Vextal slumped into his chair and began updating his resume. Though on second thought, maybe Professor who discovered void crawlers just needed friendship wouldn't look so bad on his academic record after all. Bruce the void crawler looked up at Vextal and chittered something that sounded almost like an apology. "Well," Vextal said to his class, "I suppose today's lesson is that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is our assumptions about each other." Jake grinned. Plus, pizza rolls solve most problems. Bruce chittered in agreement.